Hello, grade 12s. Welcome back. It's Economics with Ms. Piwe, and we're looking at the objectives of the public sector, and now we are moving to economic equity. Okay, so now we know that earlier on we spoke about growth, employment, and redistribution as an important economic objectives that the government has. So now we are going to focus on redistribution of income and wealth. So we know that the redistribution of income and wealth is essential. It's something that needs to happen in our country and in our economy. So the South African government uses a progressive income tax system on taxation on profits, wealth, capital gains, and also spending, and that is also used to finance free services. Okay, so there are quite a few things that we mentioned there. So we know that we're looking at redistribution of income and wealth. We know it is something that is essential, and now we are looking at this progressive income tax system. Okay, so what does it mean? So it means that the wealthy people are charged more when it comes to taxation. So they pay a higher bracket or margin when it comes to taxation, okay, because they have more money. So the more money you have, the more tax you pay. And that's what we mean by a progressive income tax system. And also that money is used to finance free services in education, in health, and so on. So all that money is generated from a progressive income tax system. Also, the money that is used to develop or to build infrastructure, that money also comes from the progressive tax system. So free social services are basic education, primary health, and to finance basic economic activities. For example, the cash grant to the poor, for example, child grants and cash grants to vulnerable people, for example, people who are living with a disability. So we know that those people qualify to get a cash grant at the end of each month so that they are able to purchase their basic services or goods that they need. And then in a progressive taxation system, so this means that the higher income earners pay higher or more income tax. Okay, so the more money you earn, then the more tax you will pay. Okay, like that song that when they say the more money you come across, the more problems you see. In economics, we say the more money you come across, the more tax you pay, because you are considered to be a person who is part of the high income earners, and therefore you are going to pay more tax in that regard. Okay, all right, so just know what a progressive tax system is, and then also just be aware of some of the social services that are funded through the progressive tax system, basic education, primary health, and also to finance some basic economic services. For example, we did mention the child grants and also the grants that are received by people that are living with a disability. Right, then we move on to budgets. So what is a budget? So a budget is a document with expected income and projected expenditure. I did say earlier on that in order for government to build infrastructure, they need to have a budget, because you can't just wake up and say, I feel like building a school. A lot of planning has to go in making sure that you've looked at your income and also that you can project your expenditure as well. So the budget is the most important item on the economic calendar. We know that the Minister of Finance during February delivers the national budget speech, and then after he has done that, and then there are various people that will give their perspective of what they thought of the minister's national budget. So the main budget is read in Parliament during February by the Minister of Finance. I've just mentioned this. And then people will then comment on the budget, and they would say whether they think it's going to be a good budget. They sometimes give it a nice catchy phrase. I know at one time it was called a give and take. You know, government was giving us this, but they were taking through syntax. So those are interesting terms that sometimes we use to make things a bit more exciting. It is authorized in Parliament and signed by the President, and it becomes law. So it is a formal document because they need to authorize the document in Parliament first, and it needs to be signed by the President. That is the main budget which is read in Parliament. The financial year of the government runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March of the following year. So that is the financial year of the government. We know that companies have different financial years, but the government has its own specific financial year, which runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March the following year. So just be aware of that. That does make a nice multiple choice question. So just be aware of the little detail as we go along. The main source of income for the state is revenue tax. So we've mentioned earlier on when we were discussing the progressive tax system that the government uses the money that it generates from collecting revenue tax in order to offer the public services, but also in order to further develop the infrastructure. So it does use that money that it receives from revenue tax. And we know that the SARS is a very efficient department when it comes to collecting tax. So you can't really dodge the taxman because he will find you. So do the right thing and pay your tax. So let's look at the different types of budgets. So we've got a medium-term expenditure framework. So the Minister of Finance delivers it in the last week of October. So it's important to know when the medium-term expenditure framework is delivered. It's delivered by the Minister of Finance in the last week of October. And then we also have the medium-term budget policy statement. The Minister of Finance informs Parliament of any changes that have occurred since February. So remember, in February, the Minister of Finance will be in Parliament. He will deliver his national budget speech in Parliament. Media is allowed to record the session, and then newspaper publications will then broadcast the budget, the highs, the highlights, what's good, what's bad, how are ordinary consumers going to benefit from the budget, and so on. Okay, so that would be the national budget. But if there are any changes that have occurred since February, then the Minister of Finance will inform Parliament during the medium-term budget policy statement. And then we've got the medium-term expenditure framework. It requires that the state sets budgets over a 3-year period. So just know this because it's also very important, consisting of rolling expenditure and revenue projections as well. Because when you are in the world of finance, it is always important to plan ahead and to have a long-term plan in order for you to achieve certain objectives. So remember, we are looking at the public sector, and the public sector has certain objectives that they wish to achieve. And in order for the public sector to achieve these objectives, budgeting, proper planning and budgeting needs to happen in order to ensure that the government has planned accordingly in order to achieve those objectives. So this is set against the backdrop of economic and fiscal goals and the prospects for the economy. Okay, so we're going back to the fiscal policy, the fiscal goals that the government is wanting to achieve, and also the prospects for the economy, because the government does want to see more economic growth. They want to see more employment opportunities, job creation happening, because with job creation, then that will result in a better standard of living. So those are the objectives of government. Okay, so let's move on. Now, earlier on, I spoke about the main or the national budget that gets delivered by the Minister of Finance in February, that will stipulate in great detail on how the government intends to collect money, and also how they intend spending the money that they've collected, and whether to see if we've got a surplus or a deficit in that budget. Okay, so the main budget or the national budget is the statement, okay, of government's planned expenditure and anticipated income for the fiscal year, which runs from the 1st of April to the 31st of March the following year. So the Minister of Finance finalizes the budget. So it is the duty of the Minister of Finance to finalize the budget and to present it to Parliament. So there are three considerations when setting up the budget. So these are also very important. So let's have a look at them. So the first one, there's a financial consideration. So Cabinet decides whether taxes have to be increased or decreased, depending on the plans that they have in terms of public services and improving infrastructure. So Cabinet will decide whether to increase or decrease the taxes. And then also it's got an economic consideration as well. Cabinet must know the needs or the requirements in the economy. Okay, so it's important because then this is more economic. If we need to create more jobs, that's more economic, and then Cabinet needs to be well informed in terms of the requirements in this regard. And then lastly, we've got the political. So political parties use the budget to implement their policy. Okay, so political consideration needs to happen, because then the political parties use the budget in order to implement their policies. We know that different political parties have different policies that they think will be ideal for South Africa. So that depends on the political party that is running the country, or whether they are an opposition party. They might have a different philosophy when it comes to budget and policies as well. Then we've got a provincial budget. They are the main beneficiaries from tax income collected by government. So this is at a provincial level. So money is paid to provinces, or money paid to provinces is based on equitable share and conditional grants. Okay, so they will consider things like the size of the province, the economic activity that happens in that particular province. So all those considerations will obviously take place. So if you live in Gauteng, we know that's the business hub of our economy. So there's a lot of development that's happening around your Johannesburg and Sandton areas. So when they are looking at budget allocations, and they would look at the economic activity that happens in that particular province, and then they will allocate the funds accordingly. So each province set up its own budget and present it to the provincial legislator, and then the financial year of provinces runs from 1st April to the 31st of March the following year. So same as the national financial year. Right, so what is the equitable share formula used to distribute revenue to provinces? So education, 51% based on the size of the school age population and the number of learners enrolled for the last 3 years. Okay, so I did speak of the size of the province and also the population as well. So they would consider that when they are allocating the budget. And to the primary health care, 19%, based on the portion of population who do not have access to basic medical services. So that's healthcare over there, then basic share of 15% based on each province's share of total population. So population plays a very important role when they are doing these equitable allocations. And then also the institutional component of this is divided equally amongst the 9 provinces. So it will roughly be about 5%. And then the poverty component of this, based on the number of people who are poor in the province. They do a lot of research around this. They would say in this particular province, there are a lot of poor people that live in that province, and then therefore, they need to be allocated accordingly based on the research that has been done. Economic output as well is very important, and it's determined by the province's contribution to the GDP of the country. Hence, I spoke of Gauteng and the economic activities that happen in that particular province in terms of business, in terms of infrastructure development. So they will then consider that when they are doing the allocations. So provinces may levy taxes, duties, grants, fines, and other charges in their own capacity as provinces. And then we also have conditional grants. So these are given to the provinces to promote national priority spending and to assist them in complying with the national norms and standards. So provinces may need a bit of help in order to meet the national standards. For example, in the Eastern Cape, the education system was not in a good place. So government had to put in certain measures in order to ensure that they bring them, up to speed in terms of improving their service offering when it comes to education. All right, so we've done so much in this lesson, so it's time for us just to quickly sum it up. So we've looked at economic growth, which is an increase in real value of production and income in the country. And then also we said that full employment is when all the people who want to work, who are looking for work, must be able to get work. And then we spoke of the budget. It is a document so I'm just going to put there, it is a document with expected income and projected expenditure. And well, that's actually the wrap of this wonderful and interesting lesson that we've just had. So remember to catch us again for our next lesson. It's been awesome just going through today's lesson. We've learned so much and we've introduced some interesting terminology. From Ospiwe, it's a wrap. Cheers, salani kahle.